This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so today we are starting with the Lightning Web Components. So let's see. So why Salesforce introduced the Lightning Web Components? Already we have Aura components. So why again Salesforce introduced Lightning Web Components? In 2014, Salesforce they introduced Aura components. Okay, so and in 2019, Salesforce introduced LWC Lightning Web Components. The reason why again they introduced a different framework, already we have Aura framework. In 2014, the web stack, whatever was there, it was not supporting most of the latest features. Okay, so it's a web stack. Web stack means the standards defined by one of the organization called W3C. There is a organization W3C. So basically, they developed HTML, XML, SOAP, and there are many other UI related technologies. They define the web standards. All the browser companies like Firefox, Chrome, IE, so everyone they registered with the W3C organization. So whatever the standards they define, as per the standards, all the browser engines they support those features. In 2014, whatever the web stack was there, some of the latest features were not supported by default. Okay, so due to that, Salesforce they developed one of the framework called Aura. So they have a thick framework, and on top of the framework, they implemented all these Aura components and all those things. So to use Lightning Web Aura components and Aura applications, that framework should be there in the background, and on top of that, all those Aura components and all those things will be executed. But in 2019, so whatever the web stack they have, I mean, the standards defined by the W3C organization, they started supporting all the latest features. By default, all the browser engines support all the features, whatever suggested by W3C organization. So that way, still if they continue with the Aura components, again, after 2019 also, in background, it needs to download that framework, and on top of that, all Aura components will be executed. So which is unnecessary. There is a performance impact. To make use of the modern web stack, modern features which are natively supported by the browsers, Salesforce again they came up with LWC. So let me show you one of the diagrams so that you can understand. I'm opening one of the posts. Okay, so if you see this picture, in 2014, in orange color, whatever you are seeing, so all those are natively supported by the browsers. As per the 2014 web stack, only so whatever you are seeing in orange color, those concepts are supported by the browsers. Here, ECMAScript means that is a JavaScript version, and even standard elements rendering, only those concepts they supported. So natively within the browsers, most of the all browsers, to make use of the other concepts. For example, modules, templates, and all those concepts. Since natively browsers did not support that time, Salesforce they developed a thick framework, and on top of that, all the Aura components and all those things will be executed. But in 2019, so as per the web standards, If you see in the orange color, they started supporting all the modern concepts, modules, decorators, shadow DOM, custom elements. All those are supported natively in the browser. Only few things needs to be developed by the platforms, whoever making use of this modern web stack. So to make use of this, on top of this, if they develop most of the features natively within the browser, those will be available. And on top of that, whatever additional things they need, they developed as a framework. So if you see here in the blue color, to apply more security, and there is a concept called Lightning Data Services. Without writing Apex code, directly we can perform DML operation. We can access the information from the database. So to support that, so they have some, they developed some framework, and also some of the standard components. So base Lightning components means whenever there is a requirement, it's not that for all requirements we develop the custom Lightning Web components. There are many standard Lightning components provided by Salesforce, so we can make use of those. So for all those things, they are using that. But all other features natively from the browser, whatever browser support, they are taking the advantage from that. So that's the reason when compared to ARA components, LWC components will be more faster. Okay, so that's the reason they are introduced. And so going forward, so clients and so whatever the ongoing development, so people are preferring using Lightning Web components because those are more faster when compared to Lightning components. So previously we used to call as Lightning components, Lightning applications like that. We have Lightning Web components, and looks both are like sounding same. To avoid that, again nowadays Salesforce, they started referring Lightning components, Lightning applications, whatever existing is there as ARA components, ARA applications like that. And anyway, LWC Lightning Web Components, that is a new technology. So that's the reason. Okay. So now before understanding the basics of this Lightning Web Components, we should know some terminology. So so far, I think we worked on Visual Force and ARA. So ARA also a little bit similar to Visual Force, the terminology and the way we develop. But here, few things are completely different. So if you are from UI background, maybe you might be knowing about this, but if you are not from UI background, so completely different terminology. Like if you see here, templates, modules, so custom components, shadow DOM, there are different terminologies. So we have to understand about that terminology. So here, first thing, web stack. When I say web stack, so web stack means the modern web standards. So what are the UI? For UI, again, there are different versions of HTML, right? So as part of the LWC, they are supporting latest HTML, HTML5. Again, there are different versions, vanilla HTML5, like that. So that latest version, and also the JavaScript version. They're supporting from JavaScript version by default 7 and higher versions. And all these things are used internally for the Lightning Web Components. Okay, so modern, whatever HTML version, whatever the JavaScript version, whatever the other concepts, whatever they support. So all those things, so we call as web stack. This will be defined by one of the organization called W3C. If someone say web stack means, just understand modern web standards. those standards will be supported by all the browsers natively. Yeah, so ECMAScript means that is the JavaScript version. And so by default, ECMAScript 7 is the one which is supported as part of the modern web stack. On top of that, the later versions also will work. So before ECMAScript 7, some of the features were not there as part of the JavaScript. They introduced major features as part of the ECMAScript 7. That is a base. On top of that, all these things will work. And rendering is a concept. So how the page show on the UI. So when you open a URL or when you try to open a page or the Lightning Web Component, how it will work. So that concept. And the standard elements means, so whatever the standard as part of the HTML library, right? So whatever the HTML5 library, whatever the elements are there, so those we call as standard elements. Okay, so we also have custom elements. Custom elements means, so as part of the web components, we introduce some of the tags, some of the components which are not as part of the HTML5. So those things we call as custom elements. Going forward, I'll show you where exactly we see that. And the event means, so when you have a page, so when you click on a button or when you click on a link, or so when you do some action, so what should happen? So to know which element, what is the information of that element. So at runtime, so we can use this event concept. So everything I'll show you practically. And the module, so this is a new terminology. So far, as part of the ARA components or Visual Force, we did not discuss about this. Module means, to understand in a simple way, it is a JavaScript file. Okay, so actually we discussed that Salesforce, they have a framework. So for this also they have a framework. So this framework will be maintained in some of the files. So to make use of this, we have to import, we have to in background, all these things will be downloaded, and on top of that, so whatever we develop, those will run. Instead of downloading this entire framework, whatever Salesforce provides, so if you, even though you are not using most of these framework related features, but if you download everything, it is a performance impact. To avoid that, previously, so as part of the RR, so what happens in background, it will download entire framework file. File size might be huge, and even though we don't use, every time it import and it will run on top of that. So here they have a concept. So they are decomposing all that major, whatever the framework file is there, into small modules. Module means JavaScript file. While developing, whatever we need only we import that. Whatever we don't need, we don't import. Okay, so that way the size of the file, whatever in background it download, so all those things will be small, and so it won't impact more performance. So based on usage only, it will, we are going to import and utilize that functionality. So to make that possible, so this module concept is there. So instead of downloading entire huge file, so whatever we need, we import and we use that. Whatever we don't need, we don't import, so that it won't download and there's no performance impact. So it's like that. Okay, so that is a module concept. Just understand, it is like a JavaScript file based on the development. While developing, based on whatever the feature you need, we are going to import that and so make use of that. So for that purpose. So the next one is directive. Directive means, so as part of the Visual Force or as part of the ARA components, if you want to dynamically represent anything, right, we give like this. Suppose I need to assign, I need to refer one of the attribute, or variable in Visual Force. We'll say like this, suppose value and something like this, and the variable name like that. But here, in a dynamic way, if you want to represent anything, suppose say here in the Lightning Web Component, we give like this. Okay, so there is no double quotes, there is no exclamatory symbol. We represent in between this. So this technically they are calling as directive. Okay, so the dynamic representation, whatever the variable you want to refer should be inside this, and observe the variation. So we don't follow like this. Here we follow like this. Okay, so that's the directive. And the decorator. So decorator means, so far already we know about some of the annotation as part of the Apex. We have @ enabled, we have @feature, @ test. Annotations will change the behavior of the class or the method or wherever you refer. Here instead of annotations, they are calling as decorator. In UI perspective, so they are calling that as decorator. Here decorator also similar meaning. Based on the decorator, whatever we mention, the behavior of the property, so those things will be changed. The variables, those things. Okay, so just to understand that decorator is like an annotation, since already we know about annotations as part of the Apex. So based on need, we refer the decorator so that it will change the behavior of the variable or whatever, wherever we use. Okay, so that's the concept of decorator. Shadow DOM. Shadow DOM, for this specially from our side, no need to do anything. Internally, as part of the web components architecture, they are maintaining this. So in general, what will happen when you have the one of the page and inside that some of the suppose say there is a page, and inside that there is a child page. Suppose assume that this is a page, inside that there is a child page. So when you have like this, in general, when you apply some styles on the parent page, all those styles will be automatically applied to the child pages. So that was the general concept. So as part of the Lightning, this web components concept, so the styling part, so whatever you are applying on the page, the parent page, it won't be applied to the child. Okay, so child you can apply different styles and differentiate. So such kind of concept called that we call as shadow DOM. Okay, so maybe while developing, I'll show you so how exactly it will work. So custom elements means which we define, which are not as part of the HTML library or whatever the as part of the framework. Okay, and template. So template is like a reusable HTML base. Okay, so what will happen? So we are going to develop the Lightning Web components. We combine all the components together and form one of the page, one of the application. Okay, so within that application, there might be multiple Lightning Web components. So through template, the UI of those components will be displayed. Okay, so dynamically it will show or hide based on the visibility of the components based on whatever we develop. So here template. So whenever we develop any web component, it generates a template to develop the UI. So for now, just understand, template is a reusable HTML logic. So that is about that. And the slot, I think this is one of the new term. So slot means, so far we know if you have a parent, if you have parent and a child, suppose say in the parent component you are referring some child component. So something say like this, and if you want to supply some values, suppose say name, assume that there is an attribute so the child component is accepting. We supply something like this, right? So far there is a possibility when you have parent-child uh, hierarchy, when you are referring components like that, we can supply the data. So the text value or number or boolean, whatever value, we can supply to the child components. A child component can get the data and initialize. But here, instead of data, we can also supply the UI logic. The UI HTML logic also we can supply. So I have a parent, I have a child. From parent, I can embed some of the UI logic into child. Okay, so such kind of concept. There are named slots, unnamed slots. So when we discuss in detail. But here, just understand. So far, we know how we can supply data from parent components to child components like that. But here, there is a concept. We can also embed UI, the HTML into child component. So that concept we call as slot. The other one is this web components. So web components reusable functionality. So it's combination of UI and the JavaScript and so styling everything we maintain as one component, and that can be reused in multiple pages of the applications whatever we develop. So by extracting the uh, general web components features, Salesforce they develop Lightning web components. So what's the difference? The difference is, so as part of the framework, Salesforce they are also providing some of the standard components. So for every requirement, no need to develop the custom web component. So sometimes you can make use of the standard web components provided by Salesforce. Okay, so this is what we are going to work. And before start creating, so few more basics we have to understand. So far, JavaScript means so how we know. So far, if you work with Visual Force or Aura components, as part of the Visual Force. So maybe if you take Visual Force, we know the function how we define like this function name like this, and if you want to supply some parameters, we supply maybe like this. I'm just taking one example. Suppose if there is a need to accept some parameters, we accept like that. And if you want to return something, suppose I'm returning some addition, we follow like this. This is a kind of syntax we use. Same thing as part of the Aura components. So which kind of syntax? So internally they wrap all the functions into one of the object. It's like a JavaScript object, you can say. Inside that, the function name. So the function name will be there, and after that, function, and after that, so whatever the parameters they are accepting, those parameters, and finally it will return. So whatever the logic you want to develop, that if you want one more function, comma, function 2, and one more function, same process. Right? We know like this. This is the way the syntax we followed as part of the Aura. So here, as part of the LWC, so it is using by default ECMAScript 7 or higher versions. As part of this, in JavaScript, they are also supporting the OOPS concepts. Like you can create a class, you can create objects, like similar to Apex classes, how we are developing. In the same way, here also you can develop the classes, you can define a constructor, you can define the methods, You can also create the object and call those methods. So such kind of syntax. So as part of the LWC, we use such kind of syntax. So we should know some of the basics of that. Okay. So for that, so already here, as part of the Apex, I think if you attended my sessions, we started with one of the basic Apex class, rectangle. So just as part of the Apex, we have to use access modifier also. It should be public or global, class name, like that. So here there is no access modifiers. So directly you can say the class and name of the class, whatever the name you want, that name. And inside that, the constructor, how we define. In case of Apex class, the constructor name should be same as class name. But here in JavaScript, the constructor name should be constructor only. So whatever the parameterized constructor or default constructor, we have to give the name of the constructor as constructor. That is something different. And here for the parameters, we don't mention any data type because JavaScript is having the capability based on the data whatever we supply internally, it will detect the data type and store. Especially from our side, no need to mention the data type. So that's why here directly, so it is accepting to parameters here. And here this dot some variable name, if you give, what will happen? Here declaring variables is not mandatory. Okay, even though if you don't declare, system internally, whenever we try to refer, it will generate. Here I did not define anything, but any variables at class level. But since here we are mentioning as this dot length, internally it will create a variable at class level like that. So, and also here it is mandatory to access all the class level variables with this keyword. If you don't use this, it cannot recognize the variable which is at class level. So these are few points. And the other one is the method. So in general, we have a method with void and non-void methods mentioning the return type. Here it won't deal with any data type. So no need to mention any return type. Directly the method name and the parameters if there are some parameters. And if you don't keep a return statement, it is like a void method. If you keep the return statement, that means this is returning some value. So it's like that. So here we don't mention any access modifier, don't mention any return type. So whether it is returning or not returning will be decided based on the return statement. Okay, so these are some of the basics. So this syntax we follow while developing LWC. And also inheritance, inheriting an interface, inheriting a class, those are common. If you want to inherit some other class, we say extends and give that other class name. So interface, if you are inheriting, we say implements and inherit that. It's like that. Yeah, and also here, object creation. Suppose this is a class. I want to call this add method. For that, so this is how just direct object name is equal to new. Even though constructor name is constructor, here we mention as the class name and whatever the parameters are there, those parameters. So this is like we created object, and to call the method object name dot the method name, and it is giving like this. So let me execute and show you, right? So really is it executing and giving the result? Let's see. So there are some websites where you can directly run the JavaScript. So maybe I'm making use of this website. Here I'm pasting everything. So this is supposed to be in comment, is commenting. So here this is the class. Whenever this page loads, everything will be loaded, and here we are creating the object for that. And after that, we are calling that add method. Maybe the result So they have one of the tag here. Inside to that we are writing the result. Okay, just run it, and if you see we are saying 30, we are supplying 10, 20. It is doing the calculation, and it is giving 30. Right? Suppose here I'm giving like this, run. Right? This is working. Right? So this is the way. This is the way how we can um, develop the classes and creating object um, inside the modern JavaScript. They are making use of the classes and OOPs based concepts. Okay, so that's it. These are some of the basics, and let's create one of the Lightning Web component. So before creating, there are again some prerequisites. Okay, so one of the prerequisite is like Gara components, developing. So in general, Ara components we develop from here. We open developer console, and from developer console you can create Ara components. Otherwise, we have tools, VS Code. In VS Code also you can create Ara components. But here the point is the LWC, the Lightning Web components can be created only in the VS Code. Even here from developer console also it is not possible to create. You should know that. Okay, so this basic point, if you don't know, and if you say we are working on LWC, it is not a good thing. Okay, so for sure we should aware of this point. We directly start working from VS Code. There's no way to develop from developer console. So that is first point we should know. The next point, whenever we create any Lightning Web components, we should follow the camel case. Camel case means starting with small letter, and after that capital letters. So if you follow like that, we call that as camel case. We have to follow this. So the reason is while referring, how we refer, suppose this is the Lightning Web component name. If you are referring this component in some other component, we refer like this. So wherever capital is there, that we give as hyphen and component like that. Okay, so that's why it's recommended to follow the camel case. Okay, so just make sure to remember and maintain that as a standard. And the other part, once we create the Lightning Web component, these three files will be created. So all these three files will be created as a default: HTML and JS and XML file. So HTML, this we call as template. In that we write the HTML logic. JS file, all the JavaScript logic in a class format we include. And XML defines where you can use this Lightning Web component. In general, as part of the ARA, to decide where we can use the ARA component, we have interfaces. We have a force colon available for all pages, right? So like that, we have some interfaces. So here we don't follow such kind of concept. Here in XML, metadata XML, in this file, we decide where this Lightning Web component can be used. And if you want to provide some configurable properties, because we embed this Lightning Web component in home page, record page, and different pages. To modify a home page or record page, or if you create an app page, we open App Builder. In App Builder, if you want to have some configurable properties, if you know about ARA, we use design, one of the resource, right? So here that also we include as part of the XML. There is like a target config, and inside that we include all those things. Okay, so just understand that. And this class. So once we generate, I'll explain. Okay, so these are some of the points which we should know, and also the other points like having my domain is prerequisite, similar to Aura components for this also. So my domain is required. Without that, we cannot make use of this Lightning Web Components, whatever we create. So all those are common things. Again, I'm specially not including here. And these are some basics. This might be useful for you. Just I'm keeping that here. Okay, now we are ready to create the Lightning Web Component. So before starting, so far any questions on whatever we discussed so far? Any questions? Okay. So now to develop, for sure we have to use the VS Code. Let's create and see how it looks. And also before even we create, there is a playground. Okay, so we should bookmark some of the websites already as part of the Aura components we discussed. Here also same websites. Okay, so Lightning component library, Lightning design system. So bookmark those websites and frequently we refer this. So when you open this Lightning component library, so here we have all standard components reference here. Whenever there is a requirement, we can try using these standard components. If something is not possible, or on top of that, if you want to make some extra logic, we have to develop. And to play even directly without creating any Lightning Web component in VS Code. So directly if you want to play here, so you can click on playground, and so here there is some sample UI, CSS, and JavaScript. So here you can play, and you can see how the result is coming and all those things. So once you do some research, you can again copy and you can paste and you can develop. It's like that. So you can also maybe download the project and you can keep for your reference, and all those options are there. Okay. So, but this one, if you have complex logic, it won't be more convenient. So just this is for some POC and all if you want to do. So in those situations, this will be useful. Okay. So now, since already some existing logic is there, so for us still we are learning basics. So it is like overloaded for us. So just I'm keeping some information like this. And also JS, there's a lot of JS is there. So let me remove. We'll discuss all those things later. Okay, for now, just I'm going to explain about very basics of how we can work. In general, whenever we create the Lightning Web component, it generate template file, that is HTML, and JS file. And here in the playground, you don't see XML. Okay, so those files will be there. And whenever it generate that JS file, as a default, it will generate like this: import Lightning element from LWC. So here, this part we call as module. This LWC, that same thing I mentioned here. You can make use of these nodes. This one is a module. Okay, there are many modules, but for sure this is the mandatory thing which we should import. So from this module also, again, there are different functionalities inside this module. Whatever we need, we include only that functionality. So here in that module, Lightning element is one of the class. This is a class. This is a JavaScript class. Okay. For any web component, whatever we create, we have to inherit that base class. To see here, to inherit, we use extends. For this app is the class name for this. So this class is inheriting this lightning element. For sure, we should inherit that to develop any lightning web component. And this export, so export is to allow this this component, this logic in some other lightning web component. This export should be there. If you don't use this, it cannot be imported in some other lightning web component. Okay, that's the meaning of that. So as a standard, this syntax will be there. So all we need to do is inside this, we need to start developing, defining variables, defining methods, constructors, and work with all those things. Okay. So here we defined one of the variable title, and here defining data type is not mandatory. Title is equal to, and we are giving this some text is there. Okay. So here instead of variable, technically they also call as properties. Properties or variables, almost same, different terminology. Okay. So this property, maybe I'll say property because in a way prospective, so people say this has property. So just understand property means it is a variable. So this property we are referring from UI. So this is a directive. If you remember, we discussed about directive, dynamic representation to refer the attribute is this. We give this inside this, the property, the variable, whatever we defined in the JS file, we refer here. So that, so whatever is there, that will be displayed here. Suppose say I'm removing this, it is removed. It's like that. And here I want to explain about one of the concept called reactive properties and non-reactive properties. So there is a concept like that. Okay. So here I just whatever we are going to discuss, all those things one by one. In this order, I will explain. First, we understand all the basics, and after that, we work with one of the small project. Okay, so far we are understanding basics. Okay, so as part of the basics, we should know about reactive. People say non-reactive properties. Properties means variables. Properties and reactive properties. So actually, non-reactive private properties. So reactive private properties. So we have public properties. So like that, people they say. Okay, so anyway, public should be always reactive. Public properties are always reactive. But main thing we should know is this: what is this when you use some properties? So when they say reactive and when they say non-reactive. Okay, so by default, these properties are private. That means this cannot be recognizable from some other Lightning Web component. Suppose say this component we embedded in some other Lightning Web component. That web component cannot see this. This is by default private. So if you want to make it public, so there is a directive. There is a decorator called @API. So when we use @API, these properties will become public. So that time we'll discuss. So now just we are dealing with this private property. So by default, all primitive types are reactive. All primitive properties are reactive. That is one of the point. So when they started, By default, even primitive or non-primitive, everything, all those properties are non-reactive. But later, again, they changed, and as part of the new releases, um, primitive types are by default reactive. Okay, so that is one point. Non-primitive types. Non-primitive here, non-primitive means object, and array are not reactive by default. Okay, let's understand this behavior. So what is this reactive and what is not reactive? Let's see in this example. So here on the UI, I'm going to introduce some of the input so that I want to provide input to this title. Whatever I type, I want to see that here. Okay. So for that, we have some standard elements. So again, if you go to this component reference, we have some standard elements available, right? So lightning input, so value is equal to, but here to refer any variable, we refer like this. And here ending tag like this is not supported. Again, this is one of the point. Because when we have something like this, as part of the ARA components, suppose if we have, we say instead of here we say column, and this one should be like this, and like this, should be like this. You can directly end like this, but here that is not supported. So here, if you want to use that, so for sure it should be like this, and it should have ending tag. So directly starting and ending like that is not supported. So for sure it should be like this. If you give like this, so whatever I have pasted, won't work. It will throw error. So this is basic thing. These kind of basics we should know. Okay. So here I should end like this. Yes, I'm also giving the matching closing tag. So again, here we have to mention the type equal to text. Okay, so we are missing some attribute. Let's refer from here. So this is a library. So here you can look for all the standard elements. Click on input. We need text input. Select that. And here we have the basics. So let's take this. Okay, I think that is not having any name property, and I'm giving some name property. That might be some problem. Or we are missing something. So label we are missing. Okay, so now run it. Okay, so now it is showing. And here I want to refer to the title. I'll say value is equal to, this is the way we have to mention title. Okay, so now it is showing like this. So now when I change the value through this, okay, in general, as part of the ARA or Visual Force, in Visual Force, if you refer to some variable, or in ARA, if you refer to some attribute, whatever the value we change, automatically that will be reflected in the variable whatever we connect. But here it won't behave like that, even though I change, right? Even though I change internally, it cannot get that value. Okay, so automatic binding is not there. If there is a change in the value, we have to make sure to call one of the method and get that value and assign to that. Okay, so that is just a little new thing here. In general, as part of the ARA, we don't do that. So here, go to this JS, and we have to define one of the method. So here, method, no return type, nothing. The method name, right? So I'll say assign value like this. But here, how can I get this element information? I'm typing some information here. That value, how I can get that? So here we have event. We have whatever the JavaScript events, keyboard events are there. Those things can be detected through this event. So whenever I call, when I do some, whenever I change the value of this or do something, through one of the JavaScript event, I'll call this. So that this event can recognize what is the element we are dealing. So from that we get the value and assign to this. To get the element information, we say event dot target. Event dot target gives this element information, whatever we are dealing. From that, which attribute you want. So here we have label, we have text, we have value. We need value, right? So if you want label, you say value. Sorry, label. So since here we need value, we'll say value. And this value I want to assign to this. This property, it is at class level. Class level means we have to use this dot. So if you don't refer this, right, as part of the Apex, we don't give this every time. And like that, if you develop here, it is a problem. So whatever the property which is inside the class, for that, for sure, we have to use this keyword. Okay, so this we are assigning. Okay, now this we have to call, right? So here in the UI to call that, I'll say when you want to call on change, I'm taking that event equal to, we have to call like that on change and call the function name. So that's it. This is the way how to call. So now what will happen whenever I try to change on change, it is calling that assign value. This will be called and it will get this value and it will assign every time, right? If you don't want to fight this every time on change, maybe on blur, something, some other events we can take. On blur means when you keep the focus away, on focus out, different events are there, we can make use of it. Now I'm taking on change, immediately it will execute and it will assign the value. And by default, this is a primitive type. Primitive means a string, integer, those types are primitive. So this can react automatically. So whenever I type, since there is a change in this, automatically, since it is referred here, that also it is shown. Right? So by default, it is reactive. So that's the behavior. Non-reactive, when it is non-reactive, when you deal with some JavaScript object, let's say maybe JSON object or arrays, so that time it is non-reactive. Let me give that example. So quickly, I'm changing this into the JSON format. So title here, maybe I'll take name. In a JSON format, right? This is a JSON object. So if you want, whatever the JSON you compose, if you want to test, there are some websites. This is a valid JSON. Now this is in a JSON format. Now to change the value of this, so we have to say dot name. So everywhere. So here title we have to say dot name. And while referring, we have to say this. Now everything is showing. So now also when there is a change here, it can reflect that change. Suppose say I'm giving console.log and I'm printing this value. Really it is coming here or not. Okay. But so what will happen? This is a object type. It is not reactive by default. Okay, even though I change value here, it will reach JavaScript. Okay, but so if you see here, console it is printing. Whatever I am typing, it is printing. It is reaching here, but this value it is not reflecting on the UI. So that is non-reactive. If you want to make this non-reactive properties as reactive, we use @track, one of the decorator. And when we use this, we also need to import that. Make sure to import, otherwise it will throw error. So when you do like this, what will happen? Non-reactive properties will become reactive. So now, if I type, now if you see that it is reflecting, right? So it is like this. So this is the concept. So what I can say here, reactive properties. So maybe here I'll say non-reactive properties will be reactive when you use @track. So we use @track to make that as reactive. Okay, so already this point, this is the one which we discussed. Okay, and the other points, since we don't have time today, we'll discuss tomorrow. But before ending today, any questions, anyone so far on understanding this? So maybe this still we did not save anywhere. Let me keep here as part of the notes I'll send to you. This is the UI. Okay, so for now today you can paste here and see the preview. Tomorrow we create from here, and also there is a concept called previously. To see the preview of these Lightning Web Components, for sure we need to deploy to server. So we need to add to some home page, or we need to add to some Lightning application and see the preview. So like this, inside this application, we need to add and see the preview. But nowadays, Salesforce introduced a local development server, which we can install, and before even deploying to Salesforce, within the local development server, without no need to deploy to Salesforce. So just create in the VS Code and launch the local development server and directly see the preview from there. It's like that. So about that local development server, those things we'll discuss tomorrow. So any questions, let me know before ending today. Any questions? Okay, we'll continue tomorrow. Thank you.